Good morning to everybody. My name is Stefano Manservisi. I have the task to moderate and organize this debate today. By the way, welcome to everybody. I'm really impressed by the participation, showing a great interest into this topic, which within the framework of the title of this year edition of the Paris Peace Forum, which is about riding out multi-crisis and basically preventing a destructive world polarization. Now we are talking about peace by the people. In other terms, what people can do, assuming that obviously peace is by people and for people. Once said that, clearly the discussion is not that easy in practice, and also following the different model. The reason why I would like very much that this discussion will allow sharing of experiences, best practices, failures, to confront a bit the different experiences, also because in my personal experience, obviously, there is not one solution. People are diverse, people are living in different contexts, conflict, tensions, radicalization, extremism are springing out different, let's say, territories, different regions, different psychology. Yeah? And therefore, I really hope that this debate will allow to shed light a bit on this. We are organized following the formula of the Paris Peace Forum with a group of core speakers to whom I will give the floor in order to, let's say, explain what is their point of view, their experience. But then I will open up the discussion to all the other participants which are around the table, each of you representing, let's say, a specific experience, a specific organization which is very active in all this. Now, we have 1 hour, therefore, I will be obliged to be quite strict in terms of time management. Let's say I suggest that everybody will not exceed the 3 minutes intervention. By the way, in 3 minutes you can say a lot of things, if you are structured. And then, in order to allow as much as possible a wide participation. So this is the point. Now, I would, just to save time, I think, and to maybe put more time for the discussion, maybe I will avoid to read the long list of core speakers. I will introduce each of you when I will give you the floor, and rather to start immediately about on this discussion, which is basically about one issue, involving civil society in conflict resolution. Everybody say that this is necessary in order to go beyond the more traditional way of mediations, negotiation, which are very often identified with institutions-led, let's say diplomat-led, expert-led. So it's something which is, let's say, carrying the idea that is limited. And precisely the point today is to widen this approach and to involve civil society, not in a gracious way, but simply to make it effective. Every attempt to build peace in a lasting way, not just to stop fighting or to prevent, the possibility of fighting, but rather to go a bit more to the roots of the problem. Therefore, this sort of holistic approach, which is called by many, very often easy to say, much more difficult to do. And therefore, basically, the starting question is about, how to do it. How to do it, considering that, what we call more traditional way of making conflict resolution, mediation, etc., cannot be excluded, of course. Therefore, how to do it is not only how to do it in alternative, but how to do it with the partners which are in any case active, being international organizations like the UN, being private organization or semi-public organization. So therefore, how to do it, and not only how to do it in order to, let's say, to organize that practically, but how to do it to make it effective. So in order to show results, in order to see to what extent this proved to be better. Involving people, obviously, is the most obvious, but, it's not so easy, also because it's not, there is not one lessons to be applied everywhere. Now, this is a bit the topic, how to do it, how to make it effective, how to do it in a holistic way. Therefore, to start this, I would ask first Hiba Casas, which is the Secretary General of the Principle for Peace Initiative, to introduce a bit and to set the scene. Please, Hiba.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone. First of all, I think you've put your finger right on the wound when you said that if we are to move to a reflection on lasting peace, we must bring the different communities, whether it's the practitioners, the academia, and the practitioners, and I add the people whose lives are shaped by conflict. And I think this was one of the impetus of the Principles for Peace initiative and the effort of the International Commission on Inclusive Peace when we launched 2 years ago, bringing together eminent persons from around the world, but realizing that a process of reflection on what works and what doesn't work in peacemaking and peace processes cannot be left to a group of very wise men and women sitting in a room and coming up with a report in New York or in Geneva. That has to be anchored in evidence and what we've learned over the years. That has to be anchored in real society perspective and the experiences of peoples whose lives are shaped by conflict. And that has to be reconciled with realpolitik considerations and some of the practical operational challenges which actually drive the efforts. So that was really behind our thought that we need to have an ecosystem approach, really bring in the various actors of this. And we launched this out of 3 considerations, just to kickstart this discussion. The first one is a sense of urgency. And I think it doesn't take much. We just need to tune into the news to see the urgency. We have record number of conflicts since World War II, the war in Ukraine, but there are 2 billion people around the world whose lives are shaped by conflict, and this is the reality. And the sense of urgency is that the peace and security landscape is changing so fast. We're so interconnected. There's such high level of polarization and misinformation out there. And I don't even need to go into the proxy and hybrid warfare and all of these complications. And the second reason, beside the sense of urgency, is a sense of fed-upness. And the sense of fed-upness is at different parts. The people whose lives have been shaped by conflict. I'm Palestinian. I've worked in the UN for 18 years. But I can tell you for a fact, there is nothing stronger than the sense of fed-upness by people whose lives are shaped by conflict and see no prospects, or those who have seen the promise of peace and seen it go down and not really deliver on it. And a sense of fed-upness by practitioners in this space, because there is no lack of goodwill and interest and funding and support, even if we say it's insufficient, etc. But there is a lot there. But we tend to see the same mistakes repeated again and again, from Afghanistan to Iraq to Mali, etc. And sometimes we're not necessarily shifting our behavior. So that sense of fed-upness is also amongst amongst the constituencies in donor countries who are saying, okay, keep putting money into the countries, but then it doesn't seem to work. 20 years in Afghanistan, what is it delivering? And then adding on that, a sense of hope. Because even with this very gloomy picture around us, there are places where peace holds. And there are a lot of efforts, especially at the local level, where we see, localized ceasefire agreements, where we see cases like Timor-Leste or, the Bangsamoro process, which is holding up against the odds. So these were the 3 key drivers. What we tried to do in bringing these 3 key anchors that I talked about, real society perspective, evidence, and practitioners' knowledge and realpolitik, to try and drive a process of collective reflection of what do we need to consolidate, what do we need to break with, because there are some areas where we need to recalibrate, and what we need potentially to move, and what new approaches do we have to adopt to address a new challenge. And we're trying to articulate that now in a Peacemakers Covenant, which we launched at the end of the year with the support of also a group of governments. We have a steering committee at ministerial level, because one of the problems in this space sometimes is that there's amazing work happening at the country level or at the local level, but it's not necessarily linked with enough or seen to be enough anchoring the realpolitik. So what we try to do is really bring in these different things together. And 3 key deficits we heard about peace processes, which I want to leave with you for our reflection. This was the outcome of extensive consultations, usual and unusual suspects. What I mean, peace actors and violent actors across the globe in 61 countries. And what we're hearing is that peace processes are not only failing because of geopolitics and realpolitik considerations. They tend to fail on their own terms because they're not seen to be broadly legitimate, because they're not seen to be inclusive enough, and because they're not transformative enough of the causes of conflict. And when I talk about the legitimacy, it's both in terms of who's involved, how, and the role of internals and externals, but also around what peace delivers in terms of tangible benefits to communities, justice, security, and governance, not only the political peace, but really around social peace. I'll stop here at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that the scene is set, underlining urgency, fed-upness, sense of hope, which are necessary to be built, and also the, more than the failure, let's say, the most difficult challenge, how to be really inclusive in a legitimate way and be transformative. I think these are the key concepts. I think that I would like to now turn to those which are working in different parts of the world in order to, let's say, tell us a bit how they did it, how they are doing, by the way, because processes are still ongoing, with the difficulties, with the failure, etc. Now, I would like to start with Adriana Sanchez, talking about Mexico, in particular, Instituto Mexicano de Derechos Humanos. Adriana.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. When I was trying to realize this moment and thinking about how do we, from Mexico, share with you our experience, I have to bring back all these women we are working with who has lost their families, who has a family member disappeared in Mexico. We have till today 107,000 disappeared people in our country. So we're here talking for them. We're here talking for those women who are missing someone in their dinner table tonight. So in this context, we've been learning that in Mexico, the search is feminized. We call it this way because feminized search is forcing our Mexican society to change. Thanks God, it's changing. Feminist search implies that women searchers are assuming a political subject, that it's not so usual in Mexico, and they are demanding the right for truth, the right for justice, the right for memory, and of course the right for searching and finding. We might know that a lot of our disappeared people in Mexico will not be found alive, and we are absolutely aware of that, but we need to find them. We need to have a place to cry for them, to pray for them, to believe we have them back somehow, somewhere. In that order, from the NGO that I'm here representing, we've created a methodology. I'm not promoting, I'm not selling a book, but I want to teach you this because it's part of what we do. This is our methodology. So we brought back the elementary school to these women. The elementary school that is forming new women with new skills. Skills to search, skills to be stronger, skills to build resilience in Mexico. And that's a really hard thing to do. Not only in Mexico, but around the world. We also built new capacities from being only a woman inside a society, but also to be individuals to create, to change, to move in a collective way, and to change the way that political things in Mexico are moving. We're creating new women's. We're teaching them how to be new women's. And when I say this, it's not because they need to be empowered by us, because the tragedy already empowered them. It's also because we are just a new way to find those roads to build and to rebuild their lives, their projects. When we talk about this, we also have some outcomes, because we have 2 years working with this School of Leadership, Participation and Democracy. That's the name of the project, and that's the name of the methodology. And the main idea and the main outcomes also are that we've learned that we build much more in the collective than as an individual. We know that for sure. Another outcome that we have is that we do believe, and we've seen it, that the leadership of women seeking and searching for their loved ones will change the problem in Mexico. They are changing the problem. And even though we have still the disappearances happening right now in my country, we know that they are the ones who are changing them. And we've also learned that our job and our mission here in the school will end in the moment they find their people, their loved ones, and in the moment the disappearances end in my country. That's when we will stop this school. Problems. Well, you've heard Mexico has thousands of problems: economical, political, social, organized crime. Government collide with organized crime itself, right? So we found during these 2 years 3 main problems. The first one is that there's no political will to help these women. So we have 107,000 women searching with no help from government. They're craving with their hands, with their own hands. They're leaving everything behind to search. The second problem is that for us, there's a permanent need to create new content for the school and also to rebuild our teaching methodology to get closer to them, because some of them can't even read. So we need to find new ways to transform all this information that it's in a book into something they can make their own. And the last one, it was the digital reach. We're talking about women around 40 to 50 years and even more. So they are not familiar with a cell phone or with a computer. So they have to learn how to use their cell phone. Many of them do not have internet. So we need to find a way to give them those instruments to be part of this school and to not be relegated by who they are, where they live, and who have they been. So that's like the experience from Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. This recalled me a discussion I had in Mexico with Lydia Cacho, who underlined in particular also the element of security that you didn't touch, but to have in mind, because while these searches are going on, the security environment is not improving, let's say, not only. And so therefore there is this element to take also into consideration. Maybe we can reflect about this later. Now, from Mexico to Sudan, now Alussan Jaffer, who is the manager of a program, of a project which is called Youth Democratic Education in Sudan, which is originating in the Frederick Ebert Foundation and also financed by the European Union. Please, Alussan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. From Sudan, let me try to define peace in a different way, because we all know that peace could be only defined in the right way, only by the people who feel its absence and also by the people who live in conflicts. So for Sudanese and for most young women and men in Sudan, peace could be only there if there is a democratic situation and there is democratic elected government. And for young people in Sudan who went out on December 2019 against authoritarian government who were ruling Sudan for more than 30 years, they tried to bring peace through establishing democracy in Sudan. And they are representing 65% of the population in Sudan. So for us in Friedrich Ebert and the European Union in Sudan, we try to help young women and men to find democracy by strengthening them and building their capacity, raising their awareness on a concept like democracy, constitution, principle, because political education in Sudan for 30 years was not in favor with the dictatorship government. And there was no way for them to learn such a concept and to understand how to be politically participation in their country. And they know that all conflicts in Sudan are basically because of the bad governance in the country and because of the authoritarian government. So we invented this project directly after the revolution, when the transitional government started we try to build the capacity of young women and men who represent the majority of Sudan, so that to prepare them for their participation in democracy and for the future of Sudan through a series of workshops, and also by providing them with funds to implement outreach activity at their communities, to raise the awareness and to raise the knowledge among their peers and at their communities, and to play a role in building a democracy from the roots of their communities. And that because peace for them is start by democracy. And this was at the beginning of the transitional government, directly after the coup in 25th of last October 2021, we goes back again to dictatorship government when the military take over the country again. But we believe both in EU and Friedrich that political education should not stop, because those majority of the population, they need democracy, and they're still fighting for democracy, but they need the knowledge, the skills that help them achieve that in their country. And the challenges that we face during this process is that working around a military-controlled country in 5 Sudanese universities, where all the old regime came back into power and trying to control everything and try to put their hand into every project that implemented, especially those raising awareness among young people who are against them. So this was very challenging after the coup, but we managed to do that in a certain way, in a new creative idea, because young people were willing to be aware and were willing to participate. So they, on a hard time, when bridges in Khartoum are closed and when all the streets are blocked, they were able and keen to come and to attend and to understand and to be part of such workshops that raise their awareness. And many of young people from different states asked to scale up this project so that to reach out to them, because they organize themselves right now in form of resistance committees, which is a group of young women and men try to defeat the military coup and try to bring democracy in Sudan, because for them democracy will only be, peace will only be through the gate of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Women, youth. Maybe I would like to complete this geographical, let's say, picture, if I may, with the Sahel, with Alexander Menil, which is working with the GIZ on this project, which is about building security and resilience. And then maybe we can have a small first discussion. Also, I would like to give the floor to Jean-Marie Guénaud. Everybody knows him, I guess, and not only as a professor of the Columbia University, but as a head of the PKO at the United Nations for long years. Therefore, let's say, a powerful, let's say, call for, let's say, also framing that on the basis of a long experience. Alexander, please.
Thanks a lot. So thanks for having me here, because I'm coming not from the peace community, but from natural resources community. So we are working, of course, with vulnerable groups, women and youth in the Sahel, Mali, Niger, and Chad specifically. But our entry point is not building peace, but it's managing sustainably and more peacefully natural resources. And of course, we come to the peace aspect. But what we have done, we have like it's really common to you, very inclusive. So we go to each different group individually. We put them as well together, very inclusive, very multi-sectorial, because one of the main challenging it's as well when you have such a complexity of situation, you have to break the silo and bring all the sector together. So we have this water, energy, food nexus approach. And what we have done, it's basically we have involved the people from the beginning, from the go diagnostic, from of their situation, because it's something quite challenging for a implementing agency like us, because we are always solution oriented, and they want to tell me, the donors who are here on the table, my superior as well, what you will do. It's not me who have the solution, it's them. We have to put the people and to accept, to be humble and to put the people in the center. And I completely agree with you when you say fed upness. One of the first things of the mayor said in Niger, it's, oh, yeah, again, a project development and what he will bring me, what he will really do for me. But with our approach, we developed causal loop to understand all the key factors of conflict. They did it. We didn't do it. They did it with the support of local associations, local NGOs that we trained, we accompany, and they did the job. And the mayor said, for the last 10 years, people are around the table, farmers, herders, women, they speak together. And we reach social agreement, and now we can do certain activity and concrete activity. Because it's another point to involve this community, but at the end of the day, you have to do something concrete for them, some actions that they are seeing. Otherwise, you are losing them right away. So, from the lesson learned, of course, you have to create the conditions they can speak, and they can speak in their voice. Their perspective can be seen by the other to have this shared vision. And this you can do it when people that they trust, that they know. So the local association, the local authority play for us a major role, and we cannot do this without them. Yeah, and for what we have done so far in Mali, Niger, and Chad, we have reaching some concrete action on the ground for the population, decided by the population. And I think, for our perspective, it's what make a huge difference. Sorry.
Thank you very much. So I retain a key concept: go local, go as local as possible. Helping in building resilience from inside the societies. You cannot bring resilience, you have to facilitate resilience emerging from the inside, which is a very important, let's say, experience and concept. Now, first, small modification in respect of the plan, but I think we have an interest maybe to listen to Jean-Marie Guénaud in view of his long experience. Please, Jean-Marie.
Thank you very much, Stefano. And I'm well aware that, speaking as a former head of peacekeeping, I speak as someone who worked for an organization of states, and which has traditionally a state-centric approach. And I think as we see that, we see the limitations of that approach. Because indeed, of course, if there is no state, if the state has collapsed, it's disastrous. You need to rebuild the state. But too often there is a sense that you build the state sort of separate from the society, and that the society has collapsed as the state has collapsed, which is not true. And I think what we have heard around the table shows how any successful effort needs to have roots in the society of the country concerned. Now, that's easier said than done, because, of course, civil society is a vast concept. It can be manipulated by various political forces, and so one has to advance with one's eyes wide open. But my experience of a conflict, and I've continued watching conflict now at Columbia University with a Kent program on conflict resolution, is that there are a number of areas where civil society is essential. And I think we haven't heard much the word accountability yet. But accountability, it starts from the bottom. It starts from the grassroots. And I think what you all describe around this table are efforts that can generate accountability, and there is no legitimacy without accountability. And I think that's one of the great contributions that civil society can make. I think there are areas that we haven't discussed yet, but like transitional justice, where indeed a state-centric approach to transitional justice very often doesn't work, because there again it has to be deeply rooted in the societies which have been broken by conflict. I think linked to transitional justice, the whole question of memory, how you're going to deal with the past, including through discussing the past. That is something that cannot be and that should not be state-centric. So for me, there's so many interesting people that we want to listen to at this table, so I don't want to speak too long. But I think these are, for me, the areas where civil society is not just an important complement, it's actually at the center. It should be at the center of our efforts.
Thank you very much, Jean-Marie. Important, I mean, having seen that from a UN perspective, therefore institutional, interstate, I think two concepts I would like to leave here for the further debate. One, if the state collapses, it's not necessarily true that civil society is also collapsing, and I think this is very important because too often, you know, we start from the top, and then we discover that in reality we should have started from the bottom, which are precisely, you know, is an issue of legitimacy and then also of effectiveness. Therefore, this is a key point. And second, the issue of the transitional justice, which very often is linked. Not in all cases, of course, but in many cases, of course, this is a way to rebuild a society, a cohesion of a society which has been broken by conflict, by tensions, by radicalization of all kinds. Now I would like to turn to Ibak Osman, who is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Karama. And Ibak, you told about Sudan and women in Sudan, but not only, in the light of your wide experience. Please, Ibak.
Yeah. Sorry. The most important thing is always who you are working with, and I agree with you, civil society. And for us, I think, of course, people were fed up and war was going on, but somehow communities are, of course, there's a difference between Sudan and, let's say, Somalia. Some countries have a total, breakdown. Others are still, vibrant. Sudan has an incredible tradition of vibrant civil society. It also has a tradition of democracy, where people can talk and, together and agree or disagree. But for us, the most important thing in trying to reach the grassroots community was to, first of all, see the areas we're working with, and then to look at what are the categories of women that we can work with: the strong women, trusted women, people who can, influence their own societies. So when they're coming to the table, they actually are bringing something to the table. So they're not just ordinary women who are just coming. This is key, that, you need to know who can influence that society if you are working in peace. For us, that was very important, and we did consultations in 7 different states, from Khartoum to Darfur to Blue Nile and all of these places, just to bring the women together. So we had that category of who we are working with, and we're convinced that these are women who can influence the rest of the society. Each of the 30 women that you are bringing in a meeting is going to bring another 30 women. So that way, when we brought them, you have to, of course, get their trust, and it was bringing them together to talk about what they can work together on. You cannot say, let's work on peace. Let's say, you bring them together, you say, what is the problem? What are the areas of, problems that you have? So even when you are bringing in one area, you are actually bringing women who don't necessarily ever work together. They might know each other because they're neighbors, but they never work together because no one ever gives, a chance to ordinary people. We ignore them. They're not intelligent. They're not educated. They're this and that. We have all of this. Yet the folklore dancer could be in a community, could be the most powerful woman in that community. So if you're not talking to her to bring the other people, everyone will ignore you. So it's very important. Key, of course, is who you are working with and how influential they are. You bring all of those women who have grievances against each other, but once you put them together for 3-4 days to talk and to dialogue with incredible facilitators, then they identify. And also, you can't go and say, we want to build peace, but what you want to say is, come together, and what are the areas you can agree to work on? What are the problems? So that was, in some places, quite new, asking ordinary people and a community, member, just, hey, what do you think and what's the problem? So for us, that was key, bringing them together, identifying their problems, facilitating that, and then doing the same thing in, let's say, 7 different states, and doing the same thing. The idea was women who are in villages or in communities are far, detached from where all the politics is happening. So giving them this opportunity to sort, to identify their problems in each of these communities, it's also bringing them together. Most of the time, women who are in capital cities have more power and more say and more active in politics than the women who are in the villages. So the fact that you are bringing everyone together, women who are actually, we say, building peace through diversity, women who are Christians, Muslims, other religions, whatever, bringing them together at the same table to talk about and to have an agreement on what the areas of problems was. We're also doing something that we're actually creating, helping to create a community that actually can talk together and can dialogue, and to believe that actually they can make a difference. So in a very small way, all we did was just to have that venue for them to meet. So in 7, let's say, states, we did that, and they all came together again, in Khartoum, to decide exactly what are the areas they can work with. There is no EU, there is no money that's coming from outside. This is all their effort. People are not sitting waiting for, we need to be, they don't even understand that. Somebody was talking about telephone. They don't have telephones, but they're very powerful, they're very articulate, they're legitimate, they're accountable to each other. So these are the keys that we have to look for. So once you bring them to the national level and say, okay, we are from Darfur, these are our problems, they have to negotiate with other women at the national level, to sort out what are areas of problems they can work with. We're taking advantage of the transition again. So it's really mobilizing that community, bringing them together, and also having, opening, doors for them to come to Khartoum and to negotiate with other women who are, more organized, and then to actually, figure out what are the 4 or 5 areas they can really agree on this, and then start talking to the powerful, I guess. So this is very important. Community peace cannot happen, or come by men in black suits in Geneva or New York. Peace can only come from, what do you say, from bottom up. That's one. 2, for example, instead of, it's very important to bring these organized women who are working for peace to meet with policymakers, to meet with Macron and others like him, and they should be here. You see, we can't speak for them, they can speak for themselves. So that, I think, my recommendation would be that to bring those women to, speak in these venues and to be on stage, not in a little room, but on stage, because they're powerful in their own right, in their own countries, to make sure that they meet policymakers and presidents and influence what's happening in their own countries. Because a lot of times, those, unfortunately, governments that are involved and dividing the countries, whether they're Europeans or Americans, never talk to the real people. So these are the real people who can influence the peace agreements that are happening, so that they will have, their voice will be a reflection of peace. And all in all, I would just, I will close this, in Somalia, they say that you can't have peace without milk, and you can't have milk without peace. So peace is not going to come until people are really feeling it's because, my life would change if this comes.
Thank you very much. Again, women at the center. Second, facilitation and not doing on behalf. Third, making it known in order that decision-making politician can grasp from the bottom what's going on. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to give the floor to Aruna Abdullahi, who is representing actually Christian, who is part of their original experience, the Youth African Network, which is linked to the African Union, in order precisely to work and to facilitate peace around the world, around the continent, in particular mobilizing youth. So now, first, how you did this network? Was it easy? It's not a bit bureaucratic, because sometimes it's smelling a bit bureaucratic, because and even a bit patronized sometimes, because it's true in our institution, could also be true for the African Union. So how you manage to do it in terms of credibility, and how this network can make the difference. And if you can tell us, please be short. The 3 minutes, because I'm watching at the clock. It's we are now in difficult area already. Please.
Voilà, ok, merci beaucoup. Je vais parler en français. Vraiment, nous sommes une organisation de la société civile sous-régionale. Nous sommes constitués à travers plusieurs organisations de la société civile dans le bassin du lac Tchad. Et ces deux organisations sont de la société civile au niveau local qui se retrouvent et qui se mettent ensemble. Donc le réseau est créé à travers les acteurs de la société civile qui sont implantés au niveau local. Notre approche est une approche locale. Et ces organisations sur la société civile que nous visons, ce sont des organisations de la société civile qui ont des compétences et des expériences dans le domaine de la consolidation de la paix, de la cohésion sociale et de l'intégration communautaire. Au niveau de ces acteurs, nous identifions toutes les organisations de la société civile qui ont des potentiels à leur niveau, ce qui facilite pour nous la mise en action de nos activités transfrontalières. Là, pour le bassin du lac Tchad, ce sont plus de 100 organisations de la société civile qui se sont mis ensemble pour adresser le problème d'inclusion communautaire et de consolidation de la paix. On le fait comment? C'est qu'on a des plateformes de WhatsApp qu'on a créées pour faciliter les interactions entre les différentes organisations de la société civile. Nous arrivons quand même à avoir des activités présentielles où on développe des activités transfrontalières parce qu'on s'était rendu compte que le problème est transfrontalier, donc un seul pays ne peut pas faire la différence. Alors il faut associer plusieurs pays. Donc quand nous avons développé cette approche au niveau du bassin du lac Tchad, nous avons aussi développé avec l'appui du PNUD qui nous soutient la même approche dans le Grand Lac pour mettre ensemble les acteurs de la société civile aussi là-bas pour adresser tous les problèmes de renforcement de la cohésion sociale et de la consolidation de la paix. Le même effort est en train d'être fait avec le secrétariat de la conférence africaine pour la paix, puisqu'on a participé aussi à ce forum en Nouakchott. Donc on est en train de développer maintenant une approche pour le Sahel. À la longue, nous voudrons vraiment avoir une approche qui va englober l'ensemble des pays africains dans le cadre de la lutte contre l'extrémisme violent, mais à base communautaire. Nous avons eu comme différence, comme expérience sur le terrain, le fait, par exemple, au Niger, où on a contribué à la démobilisation de beaucoup de jeunes dans Boko Haram. Parce qu'on a identifié des acteurs locaux comme des chefs traditionnels qui sont influents, qui sont respectés par les communautés. On les a mis ensemble avec les acteurs de la société civile identifiés qui sont pertinents. Donc, ils ont fait des caravanes ensemble. Et ces caravanes ont permis aux jeunes qui sont dans le côté du Boko Haram de se rendre compte que non, cette fois-ci, ce n'est pas l'État qui les appelle, mais c'est leur chef traditionnel qui leur parle. Alors, ils ont appelé au niveau des villages pour dire, est-ce que c'est vrai, c'est nos chefs qui ont parlé? Les gens ont dit, oui, c'est vos chefs. Et puis, c'est des jeunes aussi, des acteurs de la société civile, ils disent, donc maintenant, il n'y a pas de mensonge, on va venir. Ce n'est pas l'État. Donc, pour dire qu'au niveau local, nous avons eu la confiance où vraiment les gens ont confiance à leur chef, ils vivent ensemble. Alors, ça a activé la démobilisation de ces jeunes. Alors, nous sommes en train de partir vers un processus plus ou moins panafricain avec les acteurs de la société civile, avec l'appui du PNUD. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Je crois qu'il y a un élément intéressant qui a été inséré, c'est la première fois qu'il apparaît dans la discussion, l'élément de l'élément transfrontalier. Parce que c'est vrai que très souvent, les conflits, les tensions, les radicalisations ne sont pas liés à des phénomènes locaux au sens de l'État et des frontières dont on parle, mais c'est plutôt lié et souvent même aggravé par le fait que les frontières sont fausses, sont artificielles. Donc cet élément est très important. Et deuxième élément important, c'est, je dirais, non pas malgré l'État, mais disons avec les institutions plus proches. Nous savons très bien que pas mal d'États en Afrique ont été très centralisés, donc, disons, les chefs traditionnels et ceux qui sont crédibles sur le plan local jouent un rôle aussi bien important. Je l'ai vu aussi dans mes expériences diverses. Donc, ça sont deux éléments que je voudrais isoler dans ce petit recueil, disons, qu'à la fin, peut-être, on peut faire une synthèse. Merci beaucoup. Now, I would like to turn to Olivia Wells, Nadia's initiative. Where is the post-conflict here? Is the recovery? You know, because there's also this aspect. I mean, peace is not established because people are stopping fighting or are living better together, but what it remains after conflict, and therefore how to address the reparation issue. Olivia.
Thank you very much. So I just want to clarify something. We often frame things as conflict, post-conflict, but this description is not always accurate to the reality on the ground, and it does not reflect the way that conflict disproportionately impacts marginalized and vulnerable communities. For example, 8 years after Daesh, the so-called Islamic State, ISIS, committed genocide against the Yazidi ethno-religious minority in Iraq, we still have 200,000 Yazidis who are internally displaced just 2 hours from their homeland. And in these IDP camps, which are basically like open-air prisons, where they have no access to education, healthcare, or livelihoods opportunities. And as a result of this, we're of course seeing high rates of child marriage, suicide, sexual violence against women. We also have nearly 3,000 Yazidi women and children who are still missing and enslaved by ISIS today. We talk about ISIS like they've been defeated, but I can assure you they are still very much alive. And these women and children are still experiencing sexual slavery by these perpetrators. The 150,000 Yazidis who have actually been able to return to their ancestral homeland in the Sinjar region of Iraq are faced with this still destroyed landscape. ISIS destroyed 80% of public infrastructure and 70% of private. So they're faced with this landscape. They're also faced with ineffective government services and a lack of investment to support their rebuilding and recovery. This is why at Nadia's initiative, when we discuss what happened to the Yazidi community, we say genocide is not a singular event. It is an ongoing process of marginalization, targeted violence, and resource deprivation, and it is still very much felt by the Yazidi community today. The reason it's felt by the community today is because their voices have been marginalized in the recovery efforts by international organizations, the UN, and the Iraqi government. For example, the Sinjar Agreement, which was signed in October 2020, which was supposed to stabilize the region, improve security, and increase investments in the recovery, has not been implemented to this day. And the agreement itself was designed without any input from the Yazidi community, who it's meant to benefit. The Yazidi Survivors Law, which is a reparations bill, it was passed in March 2021. And we see now that today, there was no input in the passage of the law from survivors, who the law is meant to benefit. International organizations, including the UN, are spending millions on recovery efforts to implement projects that take a top-down approach and do not address the tangible needs of the communities they're supposed to be serving. So the result of all of this is that the Yazidi community is still suffering from the genocide. They are still living in a state of, let's say, conflict. What we're doing at Nadia's initiative, which was founded by the incredible survivor and Yazidi human rights activist, also Nobel Peace Laureate, Nadia Murad, who hopefully some of you were able to hear her speak yesterday, is we're trying very hard to change these problematic systems and narratives about how to support the community. As an international organization, we are led by Yazidi survivor, and all our staff in Iraq are Yazidis from the Sinjar community. So what that means is that we're trusted by Yazidis, and our programming directly reflects their needs and inputs, especially of survivors of ISIS captivity. So by operating in this grassroots survivor-centered, community-driven way, we are able to ensure that our programming is tangible, holistic, and sustainable. This approach, as we've heard, is being used by a lot of the organizations on this panel today and around the world, but the problem is that not enough donors are investing in the work of these organizations. Personally, I can say we've had so many donors tell us that we have to direct the funding through a UN entity rather than directing it to a local organization that's on the ground. And these local organizations, again, as we've heard today, are the organizations that need to be empowered to lead the work that will lay the long-term foundations for sustainable peace building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, apart from obviously the immediate solidarity and sympathy on this, having known, I say, how the Yazidi suffered, therefore were attacked. But there is also, I think, one important point I would like to underline. What you said, donors, find it difficult, or they don't understand, or they cannot, according to the different, let's say, situation, go so close to the ground in order to then make it sure that, apart the name of the programs, then money is arriving there and really close to people. This, I think, is a problem which is cutting across all this debate. Security and development, peace and security, in policy paper, all this is quite clear. But then how the money is channeled is much more difficult. And I know also by personal experience that, it's very difficult to go very down. But this is an issue which must be addressed. Now, we have closed with the co-speakers plus Jean-Marie, and open a bit, let's say, the window to all the other participants. I think we can count on 15 minutes.
Yeah, we can go.
15 minutes, because I think it deserves now to open up a bit the discussion, because, a certain number of concepts, urgency. Second, give results. Third, working from inside the communities. Then to ensure the legitimacy to all this, and therefore the accountability, which has been said. To organize the work with the institutions, national, international, even if I think everybody has clearly, let's say, said that let's not start with that. Let's start maybe from the inside. These are things which have been underlined. The issue of the key drivers, women and youth in general, as it has been explained, in order to let's say, also create a mindset which is not nationalistic. Because, very often these conflicts and tensions, in fact, are transnational, in particular in Africa. Not only in Africa, but in particular in Africa. So therefore, I think, and reparations, as has been said. So around these, let's say, buzzwords, I would like maybe to open a bit the floor to all the friends which are around the table. Jean-Marie already said, maybe I can ask Peter Wagner, the head of the FPI, Foreign Policy Instrument of the European Commission, which is working, let's say, actively in all this, precisely because this service is between, let's say, the classical development and the foreign policy, and therefore it has to fill precisely this kind of gap. Peter.
Thank you, Stefano. I had wanted to make 2 points. One on, indeed, what was referred to, that is the inside mediation, so how to really work more there. But given the time, I limit myself to the part which is a bit less nice for ourselves as an EU institution, but which is very important because you referred to it. And that is the challenge with which we've always been struggling and continue to struggle, how to move, not only work more at a local level, but notably with people at the local level. And for us, the so-called financial regulation, which is our governing rule book, is not compatible with it. We are working on it, we are making progress, and we have advanced. And we have initiatives by now in at least countries from A like Afghanistan to Y like Yemen, but not yet everywhere really at the level that we want to have it. Because for us it is this issue then, we are not implementing ourselves, we are usually not granting directly even at a subnational level, sometimes not even national level, we need international partners. So we also need, yesterday I was asked about risk-taking, and yes, we would occasionally be ready to be risk-taking, we would occasionally be ready to go deeper, but we need partners who are also willing and able to do that. And you refer to the UN agencies, which have possibilities, have their strengths, but also have their advantages in that respect. So for us, that is really a point where I think deeper, but also with the people there, doing all of that much faster because the conflicts are accelerating, they are intensifying very, very quickly, is another challenge for us. 18-month programming cycle, all of that is not very conducive. So we are working on it, we're making progress. But I'd like to list really for you, we need ideas, we need feedback on that to advance further. I'll stop there, thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, representing the problem, but also the call for, let's say, common solution. Now, Catherine Lawrence, Director for Governance and Conflict at GIZ, extremely active, one of the most active actors in the field. Please tell us a bit how you see around these concepts and these difficulties.
Thanks a lot, Stefano. And of course, we've already heard from my colleague Alexandre a bit about our work that we actually do on the ground with civil society organizations also, and which probably feeds into a lot of the learnings that we've heard from you also this morning. I'd like to stress maybe something different because we are a development actor. And I think we have to bring this conversation much more, and this is also why Alexandre spoke about the interlinkages between resource management and food security and energy on this table. We have to bring this to the bigger debate also of development altogether. And even though we have tried to be conflict sensitive over the past 20 years and we've developed our toolboxes, etc., I think we still see, even in our work, but also from our donors, that there are many large-scale initiatives which still are very conflict-blind, including in countries that are very, very prone to conflict. So let it be, of course, the very relevant debate we're discussing here now while the COP is happening at the same time. So issues such as just energy transition. They will affect people, they will affect societies, and they will transform how people work and interact together in entire regions. So we have to see that these kind of initiatives also take much more even into consideration our learnings from here for prevention. You know, I take the Global Gateway, which is a huge development initiative taking place in a region which is sensitive and which is even more so sensitive ever since the aggression of Russia to the Ukraine. So how can we bring all these great lessons learned even more into our mainstream development? And I've been trying to argue for this for the past 20 years, starting in Sri Lanka in the late 90s, you know, when the first toolboxes and books came out. So I'm wondering why we're still discussing this and we still haven't achieved this more, because it still seems like we're talking about a niche, and it isn't, because the world is highly fragile and it's highly interconnected, and what we do in development affects, of course, how developments also on peace and security turn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very important. You know, you can have a program to connect people and states, infrastructure, etc. But this should bring, and the lie should, because we are not there yet. You know, all the elements which are impacting on the human environment in this, its fragility, you know, and its opportunity. I think this is crucially important. Elizabeth Hume, you are the Executive Director of the Alliance for Peacebuilding. Please.
Yes, I was just going to say, I can't agree more. And here's the answer. Collective agency. We have more power than we think, but we have to be together. We have to follow the humanitarian example. They speak with one voice, and people listen. So we are not a niche sector anymore. In 2018, we're at the OECD DAC said we are at a 30-year high in global violent conflict. Think for a second. Where was that, 1988? That was the end of the Cold War. That was before Ukraine, COVID. We now know how difficult climate change is, and conflict is compounding it. Do we have to say 40 years, 50 years? Collective agency. We have to work together and we have to integrate into these other sectors, full stop.
Thank you very much. Important point, fragmentations of partners. Each of it bringing its own idea, wisdom, procedures. And this is something which obviously hampering is necessary from a certain point of view, but hampering the capacity of reaching real people. Now, Meredith Preston-McGee, Secretary General, Global Center for Pluralism. Meredith, please.
Thank you, Stefano. I wanted to make just a couple of really quick points, and maybe to refer to Hiba's earlier call on urgency, and Peter, your note on sort of the need to innovate. The innovations are there, and I think that while, you know, with due respect to my UN agency colleagues and things like that, the answer isn't funneling through UN partners. I think that there are phenomenal innovations that are possible right now about getting funding to the grassroots. And we listened to an amazing woman from the Ukrainian Fund for Women yesterday who was talking about being able to actually deliver funds to women's organizations who have just been established in the last few months, and they become the first donor, and they take some of that risk of new organizations that maybe don't have the kind of donor track record that you would need in order to give money. So I think that there are some things that are coming out, some innovations that are coming out right now that we have to be really forward leaning on, because there isn't time. We've been doing this for decades and it isn't working. I think the second thing I would say is to just go back to this question of sort of consultation with civil society, which is something that I have a bit of I don't know, I feel a bit conflicted about, because I think consultation often without real agency within decision-making is hugely problematic. And I come from Canada, where when we look at the reconciliation process with Indigenous peoples in Canada, everything is not just about consultation. Those issues are becoming about engagement in decision-making. And again, I mean, something that was said yesterday, nothing about us without us, but also this idea that it has to be genuine engagement in the decision-making processes at all levels to really echo what Hiba had said, it has to go beyond the idea of doing a few things locally and other things nationally, and really connecting those and putting these issues at the forefront and making a commitment to say, if we're going to consult, we're going to take that and we're going to do something with those decisions. We're bound by those consultations. Thanks.
Kevin, you ask the floor.
Yes, thank you, everybody, and good morning. Before I get tomatoes thrown at me, because I represent a donor, my name is Kevin Melton. I come from U.S. Agency for International Development. We hear you, and that's why we're here today. And partly, thank you, Liz, for helping us get here, and certainly others. Here's what I want to say. One, we have an administrator right now, Samantha Power, who you may know, who has made it very clear that localization and inclusive development matter. But I think you asked the right question, how? We are running into, I won't get into the technocratic, bureaucratic issues that unfortunately I have to deal with in Washington, and most capitals have to deal with as I speak to most donors who are trying to deal with these same issues. But in order for us to actually get to the point that we can work with civil society groups the way that they do need to be incorporated, that they do have agency and planning and execution and evaluation, that means a lot of rule books have to change. So let me start here by maybe some good news. Thanks to civil society, thanks a lot to the Alliance for Peace Building and Mercy Corps and others, we now have a piece of legislation in the US government called the Global Fragility Act. The Global Fragility Act is a piece of national legislation that has now led to a national strategy and now has 5 plans with pilot countries, shall we say, where we're going to continue to learn over the next decade about how we do this better. It is a bit of a modality problem. And so when it comes down to say, is that really the fair answer? No, but we have to start with it. We have to understand beyond the embassy walls, how do I get that money to the right people with the right evaluation, the right capacity, right? So just so you're aware, we are going to start working on that. And I think, I will add to the point of accountability. I think civil society is not just accountability, it's about trust, it's about cohesion. And without having civil society in part of our planning process, we can't achieve that. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. This is a key issue, the issue of procedures which are making it possible. I think comparing notes, we have all difficulties, I think, but in any case, the will is there, and I think we should work in order to, let's say, make it even more concrete. I mean, obviously, there would be a lot of things, but I would like, before concluding, to give the floor to two participants which are very close to the ground, Syria and Ukraine. I would like to start with Farah Youssef, Syria Research Fellow of the Arab Reform Initiative.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. So I agree with lots of what has been said this morning. And in the Arab Reform Initiative, we focus on the whole Arab region, so post-conflict, conflict, and the minutes that are prior to the conflict. And I think we've been focusing a lot on conflict and post-conflict today, but we need to take a minute and think about how to prevent these conflicts from happening. And when we empower civil society, I would like to take the example of Egypt, for example. Like today, we're empowering the civil society, but the whole world is in Egypt today, literally at the COP27, but we can't have info if one prisoner is alive or not, Ala Abdel Fattah. So we need to think about how the international action is contradicting itself and canceling the efforts it's doing. In our South program, we decided to work with women in conflict zones in Yemen, Libya, Iraq, Syria, and Palestine. And we decided to bring them together, as you said, for them to speak, to share experiences. But we invest a lot in research. We need to understand the local dynamics. We need to understand grassroots initiatives. We need to see what these women want. Who are the people who are doing the peace? Peace by the people, but who are these people? What kind of peace do they want? And how do they want to achieve it? How can we help? Like sometimes we need to go into details, logistic details. For example, I know like 40 close friends of mine in Syria who are very active in the civil society. They do all the work. The credit goes to men, and they don't even own laptops. And no one ever speaks about like empowering women in a logistic way, providing passports, providing laptops, providing ways to participate politically. After the COVID era, the e-participation has been a subject. So bringing women from Syria to the Paris Peace Forum would have been like very easy, actually. It's not just about bringing them physically here. We know the ecological efforts, we know the visas, we know all the challenges, but we need to be a bit more innovative, because a lot has been invested in the Syrian civil society. We have a lot of capacity building programs, we have a lot of citizenship capacity building. We have all that, but then we don't have invited spaces for these women. We don't support the invented spaces they do. We don't finance women-led organizations because we're obsessed with track records. We go with the easy choices. We want a very well-known organization that has been working for 10 years on the ground, and they're always led by men. It's women who do the work, but then they don't get promoted, they don't get well paid, and they don't get to pass their agendas. They don't get to feminize the work. So I think we need to just take a few minutes and talk about how we can invest in research, understanding the local dynamics, not just jumping into implementing programs, but taking a minute to understand the different challenges. Because like I can see that we all share some challenges, but we come from very, very different contexts. So context-specific solutions shouldn't become generalizations. De nouveau, I'm sorry, my head is mixed up. I've been speaking 3 languages for the past 2 days, so but yeah, I won't be taking longer than that, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a terrible in red timeout here. Now, I would like to force, however, a bit, if somebody who has not taken the floor so far would like just to say one word or one concept. Otherwise, you know, we can conclude here. I would say, if we can bring a message also to the more powerful people which are outside here, you know, peace, lasting peace without people is inconceivable. Any kind of, let's say, prevention in order to avoid war, you know, to avoid conflict without people is impossible. You know, the issue is how, and particularly for the partners, take the risk. And being able to take the risk to go where action makes sense and makes effective, local, hyper-local, identifying, you know, the right drivers, you know, basically women, youth, and to study in order to, let's say, not be wrong in identifying the partners, but listening to the people on the ground. So therefore, this is a basic message. If you agree, I can bring over to the decision makers out of this. I would like to thank you very much, because we would have needed maybe half an hour more, rich debate, rich contribution. I filled with a certain number of notes. Maybe I will see how this can be circulated. And thank you very much again. Have a good day to everybody. Thank you.